Hello, and welcome to Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship of North Carolina's live stream event, January 7th, 2021. My name is Susan Hunter, and many of you already know me, and I'm the chairperson and program coordinator for SFF. So Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship is a nonprofit, volunteer-run organization that has been established for 47 years. And we have been, quote, shining a light into the metaphysical community since 1973. We are an organization that has met in person once a month to sponsor a speaker until last March, obviously. And then in August, we moved forward with the Zoom platform, which has expanded our audience quite a bit. So this is an exciting time to be on the board of directors. I want to especially say hello and welcome to the people who may be joining us for the first time. We are glad you're here. And we hope you will come back and visit us again. We are very active on social media, so check out our YouTube, Meetup, Facebook, and Instagram pages. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe. I do want to make a note that our YouTube channel, we're posting the entire lectures on our YouTube channel. It's not just the little clips like we did before. So you are welcome at any time to go and review any of our past speakers through, I guess, August. If you want to receive our e-flyer to remind you of our events, you can sign up for that on our website at spiritual-frontiers.com. I'm very happy to announce that we have 2 new SFF Board of Director members who made the decision to volunteer in order to help our organization continue. So Rick Noriego, also known as Hawkeye, will be our social media coordinator. Hawkeye has donated his time at our annual psychic fairs and for many years, and is as an intuitive, and he has been very popular at our event. So thank you, Rick. Michael Hart, who served on our board a few years ago, agreed to come back on the board as a new treasurer. She also has been a practitioner and volunteer at our fundraiser as well, that we have in June. Michael is a certified master hypnotherapy coach that focuses on emotional, physical healing, and spiritual awakening. So thank you, Michael, for coming on board as treasurer. And Smith Prim, who has been on our board for about 7 years, has agreed to step into the Zoom coordinator role. He too does many modalities of healing arts work, and he's also an artist. He does glass work. So thank you, Smith. SFF is offering more opportunities if you want to help us. We have openings to be on the board. The thing we really need now is a program coordinator, and that person actually helps find inspirational speakers. The board of directors will discuss this in our meetings, and we'll think of topics and then possibly help figure out who may be good speakers for that. So it's not like you're all alone. I do want to note this job is not as involved as it used to be, because the Zoom coordinator contacts the speaker after they have agreed to do the volunteer and the paperwork is completed, and then their job's done. So let me know if you have any interest in that. You're welcome to email me at chairperson@spiritual-frontiers.com. So I want to make sure everybody understands that with all of our lectures, as with any information you receive, we ask that you use your own discernment to find the truth that resonates with you. So here's some upcoming events. Suzette Faith Foster will speak to us on February 4th, 2021, navigating these unique times while awakening from separation and suffering. Suzette used to live in Cary and actually used to be on the board of directors of SFF and now lives in Boone. She has an international virtual healing and coaching practice. So in 2005, Suzette flew over the handlebars of her mountain bike and received injuries almost identical to Christopher Reeve's. She was paralyzed and stopped breathing. Defying Western medicine's understanding or expectation, she used her mind and embraced her oneness with God to regain her breath. Her doctor and director of spine surgery at Duke Medical Hospital said she should have died at the scene. The EMS took 17 minutes to get to her. And after surgery, she was not supposed to be able to walk again, but she did. And she's dancing now. So within a few months, she was fully functional, and she continues her life from empowering and a life-changing perspective. So she's going to come to tell her story of how she used her spiritual practices and beliefs to come back from something that she shouldn't have. She wants you to know, though, even if you already know my healing story, says Suzette, I promise this program will be loaded with wisdom, healing, and transformational energy for your highest good. She has a book called Calling Back Your Power, which I highly recommend, so I hope you will look at that. On Thursday, March 4th, Randy Light will speak on hypnosis for healing and spiritual growth. So check our website, it'll have more information on that. So I want to talk to you before I introduce Catherine, which we're all waiting for, I know. SFF is very happy to have this venue to use as our talks. However, we do expect some financial support for our efforts from our audience, which is you. If you have been donating to us each month, thank you very much. And we actually have one person who's decided to support us by doing an automatic payment every month through PayPal. And you know who you are, and we thank you for that. That's a very kind thing to do to support us. So did you know when we do not have speakers like last summer, it still costs us $350 just to be Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship per month. We are all volunteers on the board, and no one is paid to give this evening to our community. When we have a speaker who is paid for and they are paid for their lecture, it costs us closer to $600 a month. So on our website is a bright yellow donate button that you can use to send your support. And we also have a Venmo link on the front page as well. Of course, if you're having financial problems, serious financial issues, we completely understand, but we are going to need more support if we're going to continue this venue. SFF would like to thank Sagewood Healing Center in Raleigh for their support for this broadcast. So, a little housekeeping, there will be a short break about halfway through Catherine's presentation, and everyone is going to be muted during her presentation, and the chat box will not be on. Near the end, we will have a live Q&A session with Catherine, and at that point, we will turn on the chat box. So at that time, you can submit your questions. Good? Okay. So thank you for joining us tonight. It is my pleasure to introduce Catherine Zola Allen. Catherine has lived in different parts of California most of her life, yet has traveled the world. About a year and a half ago, she received a very strong intuitive message to move away from California and now lives in North Durham County, North Carolina. And she'll tell you a lot more about that in her talk. She tells us that astrology gives us specifics about the challenges and gifts we came into this individual life with, and it also gives us an idea of collective trends and possibilities. Catherine is the 25-year veteran of astrology who studied with Daniel Giammario, Carolyn Casey, and Donna Cunningham. Catherine Zola Allen is an educator, social emotional learning specialist, hypnotherapist, and life coach and counselor. She has been a tarot card reader since 1986, a hypnotherapist since 1992, an astrologer since 1995, and a psychic medium trance channeler since 2002. She earned her master's in educational psychology from the University of Northern Colorado, in 2018. She completed Brazilian shamanic studies in 2004 and studied at Arthur Findlay College in England. As an intuitive development educator, she maintains 2 weekly training groups. So again, I thank you for joining us, and I'm happy to welcome Catherine. So here's Catherine.
Oh, hey, hello everyone. Thanks for attending. Hello to all my friends and clients who are attending. I love you. Mwah. All right, let's get started. We have a lot to cover. So, all right. I do hope you all find this lecture helpful and informative. Because of the seriousness of our times, I've intentionally packed way more into this slideshow than we'll have time to actually look at. The intention of doing that was so you could, anybody who's interested in going deeper with any of the subjects or learning more could look at those slides on their own time. And there's also quite a few links for videos and reading material at the end as well. I've tried my best to present the information in an objective way, and it's not my intention to offend anyone's beliefs. So that you understand my own bias filters, I have never identified as a Democrat nor a Republican, and I didn't have a horse in this race nor any previous race. If I say something you disagree with, I'm okay with that, and I hope you are too. I'm sure we disagree about many things. That's life. And I'm open-minded and flexible, so if you have any source-checked, compelling information you want to share with me about your opinions, please feel free to email me. Spirit's always been my priority, but that doesn't mean I haven't developed some political opinions, as you're probably about to hear. Astrology is an interpretive art, and I'm interpreting the planetary energies through my own perception filters, my own education, extensive research, and intuition, which I've spent decades developing. So we'll be discussing the astrological cycles of influence to know where we're going, though we have to really understand where we've been. Since we've been in 2020, the most confusing year on record for decades, that's not so easy. So we'll start with a little astrological review, then that'll get us all on the same page. I'll be discussing all phenomena from the perspective of the US Sibley chart because of serious situation we find ourselves in as a nation, and because I could never give you enough information in an hour and a half to answer your individual chart questions. Your charts are all just too unique. So by the end, though, you will understand the energies at work on all of us and the best ways to navigate and utilize those energies. No planet or energy of any kind exists or works in isolation. Planetary energies have many ways of building upon each other and working together. Together, they contribute the subtle and overt energies that create a zeitgeist or spirit mood of an era. Okay. All right, we're back and we have slides. Yay! All right, thanks for your patience. All right, where were we? So the planets work together, and even though they're all in different places in the cosmos and they run in different cycles of time and patterns of orbits, they do show up in charts in interesting patterns. So we will be looking at some of those patterns. So the challenge is to not get reductionist or Cartesian about it all and cut it up into pieces, but to see how everything works together and as a whole so that we can get the big picture. A good analogy is that planets work together much as organs do. They are all vital to our well-being and all need to be harmoniously balanced and working and communicating well with each other for overall health to be maintained. Transits work very subjectively, and their effects are not only dictated by our individual charts, but also our free will and how we are using and working with those energies or ignoring their influence in our lives. 2020 was an amazing and beautiful year for some people, while for others it meant loss, death, pain, and suffering. So you can see how the same energies don't show up the same way for everyone. Carl Jung, when asked about what the best way was to survive collective insanity like World War II, said, "To be as self-actualized as possible." People who are flexible, who have spent time developing grit and resilience, who have a strong sense of capital S self, and who know who they are, can weather a crisis far better than others can. One of the books I reread this year was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I figured anyone who survived a Nazi concentration camp might be an inspiring read for 2020. Rick Levine, an astrologer, I think said, fate is what happens to you. Free will is how you respond. So these are some of my favorite pictures from the year. I just think it's fabulous and shows what an interesting year it was. I spent the year hiking and meditating and doing my 2 Zoom groups, intuitive development Zoom groups. And I'm starting 2 new groups here locally at the end of the month, intuitive development and astrology for individuation. More on that at the end. Many astrologers got 2020 wrong when they were making predictions, and few saw a pandemic. Some, like Susan Miller, predicted a great and prosperous year, which technically, if you're part of the 1%, she was right. And actually 2020 is over finally, and we still don't really know what went on or why. And I think we'll be processing last year for many years to come, much like we're still processing 9/11. Despite 2 decades as a professional astrologer, I don't check the stars before doing anything. I worked with intuition and meditation, hypnosis, psychic and mediumistic energies long before I became an astrologer. I've always said that the road to self-actualization or enlightenment is not for the weak of heart. It's a long, hard hero's journey that requires a strong focus on radical personal responsibility and authenticity. Not easy to do, but it is the most important work we can do with our lives. It's more important than anything else we do. And that's how I use astrology for my own development and to assist my clients. And everything that happens to us helps us get there. Every conflict, every crisis, every wound, every joy, it's all put to use. And it fuels us towards our most expansive and authentic selves, towards our greatest potential. I spent the last 8 years living in Northern California in a tiny house that I designed and built. And then at the end of 2018, during meditation, I got a message to leave California, not just the area, but California altogether. And I kept asking why. And I just had this feeling that California was a sinking ship, and I didn't know why. And I didn't really even know where to go. But I left. And just a few months ago, I got word that my tiny house had burned down. A week before it burned down, a friend of mine, Stephanie, who is a fellow psychic medium, sent me this meme of sage, giant sage stick, and smoke from the sage. And this is what my house looks like now. Once I got here, I realized that I needed to build another house, and that's something I swore I would never do. But the universe sent me a really great contractor to work with me, and Patrick Rinaldi, and best contractor I've ever met. And everything just fell into place. And 12-hour days, 7 days a week for several months through snow and rain, and I had another home. I felt pressure to finish quickly, and I moved in just as lockdown was beginning. So it all had a reason. Back in October when I arrived, I had a very strange nightmare about cannibals. I'd never dreamt about cannibals in my life, and they seemed to be American cannibals. They were all speaking English, and I think they were all white. I was in a forest instead of a jungle, and they were running around crazy, and they were trying to get me to join in. And I said to them very adamantly, absolutely not. Nothing you can do will make me. And I turned around and I left. And it wasn't until a few months later I realized that that dream had helped prepare me for the craziness that was 2020. Confused by world events, I meditated in March and got information that turned out to be validated by international scientific research half a year later. because of this information, the years of developing a faith and trust in spirit, and because I do a Buddhist practice of contemplating my own mortality daily, which I've done for a long time, I didn't spend a year in fear and anxiety, but I was confused and curious. So you can see I do a lot of my intuitive work outside of astrology. Some friends called me in March and told me to stay home one day when Saturn and Mars were opposite my Mercury. Kind of made sense. Mercury is transportation, and Saturn and Mars in Aquarius could be a unexpected difficulty. I did stay home, but mostly because I was busy building the interior of my house and it was raining outside. So, but it turns out that the way the transit worked for me was that I had the opportunity to speak my truth from the heart, confidently and clearly from a place of firm inner authority and intuitive knowingness. Another way that configuration can be interpreted. Kind of how I did in the cannibal dream. Stand up, speak my truth, get the heck out of that jungle or that forest. So this illustrates the broad range of interpretive options available with every astrological occurrence, which makes it challenging if used without intuitive guidance. So what I really liked about 2020 was the sense of humor and the creativity of people dealing with the madness. These are some of my favorite memes that showed up. One day I was hiking with a friend and we were talking about if 2020 was a movie or a book, who would have written it? And we decided it was a movie written by Stephen King, directed by Stanley Kubrick, kind of like The Shining, only maybe with Simon Pegg this go around. If we'd gotten Douglas Adams instead of Stephen King to write the movie for the year, we would have at least gotten an apology. We apologize for the inconvenience. God. So yeah, I'm a nerd. Probably figured that out by now. One of the emotional maturation mile markers is when we ask why something is happening for us rather than why it's happening to us. Astrology can help answer this question. One of my favorite ways to use astrology is to work with transits and progress charts of traumatic events to help find the meaning and healing for those past events. So for 2020, I was very surprised to see how strangely accurate the New Year's chart was for the year. I drew it up for DC because I've been working mostly with the transits with the Sibley US chart, which is there on the right. And you can see the New Year's Day chart is quite interesting. It's the one on the left. So everything is below the horizon except for Uranus and the North Node. There's the North Node there. And there's Uranus. So this, I believe that Uranus in the 7th house in this position is probably a marker for the way our social lives went digital with computers and electronics and hardly any face-to-face. And this is accentuated by having Venus unaspected in the 5th house right down here, which happens to be the chart ruler. So this is quite an emphasis. This suggests a disconnection from surroundings and others, vulnerable to isolation, challenges relating to others, feeling self or others as less charming, social distancing and ugly fights, loss of friends and falling out with relatives, relationships with others through technology or from a long distance. Uranus in Taurus, entertainingly, had the world talking about herd mentality, herd immunity, people being sheep, and gathering together in groups to speak truth to power. Wanting to belong to, be socially accepted, to be seen as one of the good guys, including virtue signaling, and deriving a sense of identity or external validation from a larger group was also seen in full flower. Many pursued activities to feel less isolated and alone, even if it meant behaving in unauthentic ways or lashing out at each other. The shadow of Uranus certainly contributed to looting, shooting, and destructive rebellious expressions. Saturn gave us a taste for the next 2.5 years that it will be in Aquarius back in March and June, and I feel it contributed to mandatory lockdown social distancing. Also, the last time it was in Aquarius, the National Guard was called into Los Angeles for the LA riots. I was there for that one. I believe they were also used last year by some states. So as you can see down here below, there's a large stellium in Capricorn on the IC. And this opposes the Sibley Cancer stellium over here in the right chart. This is the Cancer stellium. This represents to me the mandates, laws, breach of constitutional rights, and heavy-handed authoritarianism causing a wide variety of emotional responses of last year. A focus on home, mandated by authority. Things like peer pressure, shunning, censorship, cancel culture, and communication in general are emphasized with this chart. This one on the left. I think it also represents the unprecedented amount of pushback the powers that be experienced this year, which proved humans very capable in general of thinking for themselves and suspicious of corrupt corporations and governments. In 2015, a Gallup poll showed that something like 75% of the US population thought the government very corrupt. And that was before all the madness of last year, and even before the last election. The Moon, Neptune, Lilith, Chiron in the 6th put the focus on health, hypochondria, disinfecting mania, fear of being infected from others, boundary issues of Neptune, Pisces. You can see Neptune and the Moon right here in the 6th house. It also threw into the spotlight our fear of death and our personal collective shadow. And with the Chiron squaring Mercury, respiratory issues, and simply breathing could, potentially being able to make somebody sick or getting ourselves sick, which is almost an extreme extension of the original sin doctrine. Authority likes to tell us just how innately evil we are. Neptune, sextile Saturn, Pluto, I believe, is where that comes in our US chart. Maybe it's a diversionary tactic to keep our attention off of them. That's my take on it. We're told to listen to the science, but science was confusing, kept giving us wrong numbers, seemed to disagree with other science, and in short, was perfectly confusing and chaotic, which is very Neptune in the 6th house. This also appropriately falls in the 3rd house of communication for the US chart. So Chiron lands right on the US IC. This is the IC right here. And transiting Chiron is right here, 1 degrees Aries, which is where we have, as a nation, we have the IC, which is a very important part of the chart for me. I'll explain later about that. This, I believe, is what threw us into an emotional, that shook us to the emotional core and created very heavy-handed mandates and restrictions. Confusing messages like telling us it's safe to shop at Costco or Walmart, but we can't shop at mom and pop stores, and they went out of business. It was very Neptune in the 6th house as well. So we got a lot of mixed messages. Mars, 30 minutes from critical degree, right over here. Is in the 2nd house for the chart here, and it's represents, in my opinion, financial manipulation and destruction, which we all experienced last year. One astrologer calls this the be prepared to be dominated degree, making a sacrifice of oneself to achieve peace and quiet, ramming one's opinion home, being expelled, being made an example of. All of that sounds very 2020. This might possibly be the energy that contributed to the cure being worse than the disease. The reactive response will lead to more deaths, and in some cases already has, than the virus itself, which even the World Health Organization has warned us against. For example, more Japanese committed suicide in October than died of COVID all year long. There's a headline later in the slides, I think towards the end, if you want to know the very reputable source for that statistic. Jupiter, Mercury, Capricorn. This made us all very opinionated last year in uncompromising ways. I feel it contributed to us over-identifying in intolerant and fundamentalist ways with our ideas. It's not the first time we've ever disagreed with each other about anything big or important, but we didn't do it very well last year. We did, however, I feel this configuration also lends itself to coming up with alternative platforms for things that are being censored, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. All kinds of alternatives popped up. The North Node in Cancer at the midheaven led to physical security becoming a focus, emotional charged beliefs, and led us that led us to stay at home in our shell, Cancerian, in our little shell at home. I think this configuration is an accentuation of the paternalistic role we've co-created our government to be. The government going from protective daddy to now our personal physician, thanks to Big Pharma. Big Pharma's financial role in politics was concretized last year. Let the government take care of you. They know what's best for you. If it destroys your livelihood, if the cure is worse than the disease, if quarantine of healthy populations is unprecedented and unnecessary, well, oh well. And that's things we all have to work out together. The limiting of civil liberties for our own good, of course, is history, and those of us paying attention saw how much of it happened after 9/11. I listened to a lot of Charles Eisenstein. I recommend any of his videos for anybody who's looking for inspiration. He's very well-spoken and very intelligent young man who seems to really have his finger on the pulse of what everything's about and what's going on. So 741. All right, let's see. So deconditioning is a prerequisite to individuation, and individuation is a prerequisite for having an expansive and meaningful life experience. To become self-actualized, you must be able to move beyond your own programming, wounds, peer pressure, guilt trips, manipulation, brainwashing. In order to be who you really are, to think for yourself, to become ourselves, we have to face the collective conditioning and the layers on layers of narratives. I like the babushka doll for that as a metaphor. The soul is that doll in the very middle that doesn't come apart. It's the whole of the part of us that's whole, our soul. She's so in the arts, in the act of individuation is where we crack open all those narratives and release ourselves from all the trap of all the limiting beliefs. So we're gonna move to this slide is for anyone who wants more information about the great mutation that happened in December. We moved into a new cycle of air after 200 years of Earth, with a 20-year preview during the 80s of air. An astrologer, Rosanna Mario, calls the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction the particle and wave conjunction, which I really like, quantum physics. Beautiful analogy that it's so appropriate. The dense material element of Saturn, the expansiveness of Jupiter, matter is asking for an infusion of greater meaning, a bigger, more expansive narrative that works for all of humanity, not just the 1%. We've allowed and participated in our humanity being stripped from us by getting caught up in the superficial pop culture pursuit of money and materialism. And now we're here feeling this Aquarian pull, to fill that empty hole where our soulful center is meant to be. Reclaiming our authentic sense of self is what Aquarius wants from us. These planetary configurations are an opportunity to mature how we deal with power, starting with our own. Our job is to know all our parts and get them in balance. And this is how we can make a better world. It starts right here at home. as Carolyn Casey says, I think it was define yourself or be defined. So in this act of individuation, it's an act of defining ourselves. Excuse me. So some of the cycles that we're undergoing currently do go on, start back and relate back to some of the things that happened in 9/11 and earlier times. So I threw this chart in for anyone who wants to know more about that. We unfortunately don't have time to talk about it. It's very interesting though. So feel free to take a look at that. We're going to talk about the eclipses. The eclipses for 2020 were very interesting. There were 6 of them, and they all triggered important parts of the US Sibley chart. 2 of them were exact, and those were the ones that happened in July and November. For the upcoming year, there's only 4, and they also all trigger important parts of the Sibley chart, the US chart. The 2 of them are also exact. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. In summary, I do think that 2020 had some very positive energies with Jupiter and Uranus in this scenario. I think if it wasn't for them, we'd have had a much worse year, if you can imagine. Even people who don't believe in astrology could feel the energies of Pluto, attempt to control and manipulate, yet old structures crumbling so that something new could be born. Uranus, people standing up for their rights and questioning the dystopian tech future that's being manufactured without our consent. And Jupiter, adamant opinions, intolerance, and clamoring for greater justice in the world. Neptune, people falling for media manipulation, but also going deeper spiritually to find common ground and compassion. We're in a growth spurt. That's why everything's intensified right now. It's an epic of maturation, a collective dark night of the soul, a fork in the road. And we're being asked, are we going to take the road that leads into more expansive, authentic, soulful, and meaningful lives, or the road that leads to a dystopian, totalitarian, sci-fi future? Choice is ours. And we are making it. C.S. Lewis said, when the whole world is running towards a cliff, he who is running in the opposite direction appears to have lost his mind. I think that quote fairly sums up 2020. So I've included a couple more slides about the, sorry, lost my train of thought, about the eclipses that you can take a look at later. Lots of information in here. So I'm a big believer in following the money when it comes to trying to figure out what's going on in the socio-political arena, since you can trust very little of what you actually hear. I've studied a lot of history, including from an astrological perspective, and I know that money is always the motivating factor for every invasion, war, pogrom, massacre, conversion, and pillage. Revenge maybe is a secondary factor, but even that's the response to an initial monetarily inspired crime, probably. Learning about the astonishing finances of World War II was the depressing reality that got me moving in that direction to look at finances. Probably a book I read on the history of banking too. We don't have time to look at these, look at this in detail, but I do recommend you look at these slides that I've prepared. Also, Requiem for the American Dream, a documentary with Noam Chomsky, which is free on YouTube, has a clip of Greenspan saying we have too much democracy in the US and we need to rein it in. In case you're wondering how we got to where we are now, I really recommend that documentary. I've watched it several times. It's amazing. So I've included a couple of charts for the stock market crash that happened last year with a little summary and a nice view of the Wall Street bull. A slide on who made money in 2020, so you know who profited, and a slide about what happened to the rest of us with some statistics in case you aren't up on that. Let's see. And here's some headlines of some of the people who are investigating some of the inappropriate financial dealings that went on last year. And here's a chart for the Federal Reserve when the Federal Reserve was created. And I threw this in because, as you can see, Jupiter is also on Pluto, like we had last year. And in this chart, transiting Pluto is on Venus. Both of those have to do with finances. So this is a chart for that with a little key for some of the astrological indicators, because a lot of the things that we're going through and have been going through since the Federal Reserve was created started at this time. Some of you might not know that some astrologers use fixed signs and asteroids, and there's an asteroid called Wuhan. So I threw this slide in for those of you who might be interested. It's from Dimitri George, and it's very interesting how Wuhan, when placed in the Sibley US chart, was right there along with the 3 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, as they moved through the house of finances. So you can see why finances were hit so hard this last year, and they're going to continue, unfortunately, to be affected. So the age of Aquarius, there's a lot of talk about the age of Aquarius and many opinions about when it's starting and when it's, what's going on. But transits and ages don't happen on a specific point so much as a gradual easing into and out with a varying degree of influence. Like winter solstice, winter doesn't just happen on winter solstice, but the leaves slowly fall and it gets colder and colder. So it's an easing into winter, or any of the seasons. We can already feel the influences of the age of Aquarius, obviously, and despite being technically a long way off, because all the planetary transits are trying to prepare us for that shift. Like everything else, like all the other signs, there's a shadow and a balanced expression for Aquarius. And in general, what we do collectively is the shadow, unfortunately. The shadow of Aquarius is a sci-fi dystopian with eugenics, GMOs, surveillance state, drone assassins, biosecurity, heart attack guns, flying syringes, in case no one's up on that. Those are genetically modified mosquitoes financed by Bill Gates to distribute vaccines. So you could be vaccinated in the future by a mosquito. I know it doesn't sound real, but it is. Trust me, I've done the research. So nanobots, cloning. So our job is to become self-actualized as possible and take responsibility for how we are going to steer this potentially very lovely Aquarian energy into a better manifestation, because it can be much better than that. And one of the reasons planetary energies lean heavily towards the shadow manifestation is because we're a collection of people who, as individuals, a lot of us haven't done much work on ourselves, nor healed and integrated our shadow. So all of that compounds collectively into us leaning collectively towards expressing that flavor of the astrological influences. Becomes an amalgam of a bunch of little shadows, in other words. Egregores are, for those who don't know what those are, I have a slide later on, you can read more about it. It's basically an energy entity that gets created with a strong mass of collective intention. So governments, in a sense, are kind of an egregore. FBI, spy satellites, cell tracing, massive surveillance, all of these things have helped, have created an overconfidence that makes the government egregore feel invincible, godlike, and all-knowing. And that's what makes it think it can do things like genetically modify mosquitoes to deliver vaccines. So 2021, let's talk about that. People with mutable signs around 20 degrees Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius should pay attention this year for sure, as well as early degrees to fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. The one prediction I make with all certainty for this year is that information and communication will continue to get very strange making us question our very ideas about reality, as if we haven't already from last year. I believe this will be continuing debate about elections and could include further disclosure regarding things like extraterrestrials that is either true or fictitious. In fact, I suspect it's been sort of held or created as a wild card to be played at just the right moment for maximum shock and awe, rather than being held back because we can't handle the truth about those kind of things. I feel like they're going to use it strategically. I'm not buying the paternalistic urge to save us from the truth. It would create an impact that would break us of any dissension and resistance and get us all rallying together in an agenda of control. The benefit of not knowing what's true is we struggle to develop greater discernment. So even these things that feel like they're pulling us off center and leaving us confused and in a cloud of unknowing are really helpful and move us towards greater development as souls, individuals. And discernment is something we can all use more of. Dissociation and escapism will continue, but so will dissent and people fighting against and pushing for more, fighting against the push for more control. These energies can lead us to a more empathic, intuitive notion, such as Eastern philosophy has been speaking of for millennia, and that is that life is a dream and it is our job to dream well. That's very Neptunian story for the year. For those of you who don't know, Paul Hellyer, the former Canadian Defense Minister, has been announcing since 2011 that governments have been working with extraterrestrials. And just a few weeks ago, head of Israel's space security program for 30 years, Haim Eshed, on December 7th, also said the same exact thing, that governments are working with extraterrestrials. So I don't know. If you want to read a very entertaining book, it's a novel, Little Green Men by Christopher Buckley. Highly recommend it. I read it twice. It was so funny. He's the son of the Buckley from I can't remember his father's first name, annoying, interesting individual who had I think he had a talk show and would interview political people. Anyways, so the New Year's chart for 2021. Oh, hold on. I have to get to the next group of slides. Might need help with this. I need okay, hold on 1 second. Sorry, not my computer.
Okay, where do you want to go?
I want this to be screen shared. Yes. Okay. All right. So I've included a chart for each month for the first day of the month. This will help you just to get an idea of the movement of the planets and keep an eye on the transits as they go. I seem to be missing, sorry, there it is. That's what I'm looking for. All right, so the New Year's chart for 2021. All right. Sagittarius is the chart ruler, and a tight T-square with transiting and US Neptune, and trying the US Mars, but opposing the US Mars. So let's see, typo, sorry. This is, in my opinion, is the country still feeling that justice is not being served, and the crumbling narrative of Neptune, most elevated, is failing, leading to anger, disappointment, feeling victimized. I believe there will be an even greater number of lawsuits as people seek justice and compensation for ruined lives and businesses. I'd like to think this is a good sign, though, because it isn't Sagittarius after all. And that's a very optimistic sign. I have a lot of Sag in my chart. And I think it's a score we can work out together. The moon is also opposite Saturn for this chart, which is classically seen as depression. And this happens in the US 2nd and 8th houses. So I believe this doesn't necessarily mean financially speaking, but I do, being a realist, I suspect we're going to have some more hard times financially. Venus conjunct in the nodes in Sag Gemini is what might make us susceptible to believing that the changes being offered are actually what they pretend them to be. Gemini being a good mimic, that we have no choice because of the medical crisis, since it's squaring Neptune in the 6th, is likely. If we can stay out of fear and dogma and keep a sense of humor, Sagittarian again, we'll be able to parse out the truth better. Humor gets in the side door and helps us see more clearly. I made a concerted effort to laugh more in 2020, and I think that would be a good strategy for 2021 as well. Laughter, it's great. Good medicine. To get together with others and make each other laugh. That's my prescription for 2021. Laughter is an antidote to fear and control, and humor is the first thing that goes during repressive dictatorial times. If you think that a regime change is going to fix everything, you're ignoring the fact that both regimes are owned by the same money. Sorry, don't shoot the messenger. This is actually something that Gallup polls have shown, even going back years, that most Americans, 75%, I believe it was, believe that the government was corrupt, and that the source of that corruption would be money coming from corporations. Yeah, sorry, I got a little political there. This configuration is very important and is trying to make us more discerning about what we believe. Jupiter is opportunity, and it wants us to open our eyes and see the infinite potential. It wants us to be creative this year. It starts with Leo moon after all in the New Year's chart. And the way out of emotional or financial depression can be us taking charge of making change and being innovative about our daily survival and resources. Let's not leave the power to make change in the hands of corrupt politicians or innovation to corporations who just want to sell us something. We're better than that. We can be the agents of change. Starting the year off, we have transiting Pluto exactly opposite the Sibley Mercury up here on the right. There's the Mercury. And here's the transiting Pluto. To me, this could be draconian attempts to control, censor, dictate as the power elite sense their stronghold is slipping and in peril. But I believe that the pushback is definitely strengthened this year and will continue. The North Node in Gemini, 19 degrees. This year could lead to more infighting as we turn against each other more and ignore the real cause of the problems, the egregore of government we've co-created. We are in, for all intents and purposes, a war of ideas. Facts and perceptions of reality have been fighting for a while now, and there's a science to defend every side. This is not the year to bolster our little sense of self over identity with our, over identity with our monkey minds. What we believe is not who we are. Almost everything seen from a higher perspective is false. So the idea is to see ourselves and see life and what's going on collectively from a soul's perspective, soul's eye view. As a Buddhist, I believe everybody is exactly where they need to be, doing exactly what they need to do. And it's all part of our individual development. Starting the year with that lovely Leo moon most elevated, we could think creatively for ourselves this year to find solutions. Mars is moving into the US 5th house. So let's shine. Let's get together and come up with some alternatives that are good for us, actually good for us. With the moon on the US North Node, we can ask ourselves, what can we do to make this country something we can really be proud of, something we can really love, something that lives up to its ideals. We can start this by learning to love ourselves so we can love others. Let's use love, not divisiveness, as our game plan this year. The civil war we can have doesn't have to be brother against brother again. Let's make it more an independence from the paternalistic authoritarian egregore we've created by handing over our power and money for centuries. Let's grow up and be our own father instead of projecting that father onto a government, and own our inner authority so we don't need them. We can repurpose that egregore maybe for something else, like cleaning up the environment or policing business and industry. God knows they need it more than we do. The transiting nodes move from Capricorn to Cancer for the year, where they will be squaring Neptune. With an exact square to Neptune, actually, we were asked to deal with greater mental health issues this year, to face our own naivete, feeling victimized, which is a symptom of disempowerment, our disappointment and disillusionment, which is a result of not seeing things as they are, not being grounded. We strive to expand, get details, become more curious about life, gather data to write better stories for ourselves, have better boundaries, and especially regarding healthcare and work will be at the forefront as we ask, is it my body, my choice, or can authority do what it wants with our bodies? Is it ethical, moral, constitutionally legal to unleash flying syringes, mosquitoes, and vaccinate people against their will? I'm not so sure about that. The last time we moved from Capricorn Cancer to Gemini Sag nodes was around 9/11. So that was another triggering event like COVID for an increase in government control, surveillance, and limits to freedom and civil liberties. So the themes for the year, let's see, what do we got? Mercury is a very busy planet this month, January. Expect the unexpected, discontent, arguments, and more civil unrest, as you may have seen yesterday in the news. January 5th, Mercury was conjunct Pluto, and then it entered Aquarius yesterday. Perfect timing with it in Aquarius. I would say that was a good dose of rebellious energy yesterday. We got a taste of that Aquarian energy yesterday. So with the small siege of the White House, in case there's anyone who hasn't seen the news. It squares Mars January 9th through 13th while being conjunct Saturn and Jupiter, and square Uranus. I believe some very hard truths that many people have been in denial about will surface so that they can no longer be ignored. The very next day, Uranus comes out of a long retrograde on the 14th of this month. The day Mars conjunct Uranus is exact on the 21st, the moon joins them in squares transiting Saturn, Jupiter. So all of this just 4 degrees off of Lilith, just in time for the presidential swearing in. It's a busy month. I can't help but feel all this chaotic energy and change and new information will lead to justice and positive outcomes. An AstroDance article believes the web could have issues during the end of the month because it's undergoing its first Saturn return as an entity. Even businesses have astrological charts. I believe there's going to be some very massive information leaks this month. I think we're in a war, but we don't realize it. We don't recognize it as a war since it's different than past wars. If you want to get an idea of how things can be warlike without being actually war as we know it, you can read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Jenkins, I believe, is the author, something like that. It's a good read. An old, let's see, hold on. So in essence, we're in the midst of dueling narratives, an old elitist materialistic narrative versus something more meaningful, more expansive, more aligned with the concept of family of humankind, something more sacred and soulful. So again, we're at that fork in the road. Which of these we're going to choose? The emphasis of the U.S. chart has in its second house, especially lately, brings up the theme of self-esteem. Carolyn Meese, in her lecture on Following the Yellow Brick Road, a lecture I highly recommend. It's 8 hours long, but it's fabulous. There's a link for it, I believe, at the end of the slides. She suggests that low self-esteem is at the root of all the world's problems. Basically, if we all loved ourselves more, none of this stuff would be happening. And I agree. I really do. I think learning to love ourselves and to have a good relationship with ourselves is part of the individuation process, and it's vital. It's absolutely vital. Mercury goes retrograde, yay, at the end of the month, 1 degree shy of hitting the US moon, and it goes retrograde in Aquarius. So we're starting right out at the end of the year with lots of Aquarius energy with the Jupiter, Saturn, and now Mercury retrograde. Hopefully this retrograde will give us the downtime for a few weeks to make some sense out of all the sudden changes and chaos of January, and to rethink our sense of self and how authentically we're living and communicating, and how we want to respond to everything that's going on. Let's see. I think that things might begin to die down towards the end of February, but not sure. It just seems like the whole year is going to also be challenging, but in slightly different ways than last year. So here's the egregore slide you can all take a look at later. Explains those energies. This is 2 different ways of looking at the upcoming cycles that we're going to be having for the year. And these are the retrograde planets for 2021. The second, so all 3 Mercury retrogrades this year will be in air, which is interesting considering Jupiter and Saturn just started the air cycle for the Great Mutation on the 21st of last month. The second one will be in Gemini, and it will be on the US Mars right over here. And the third one will be in Libra, and it will back up over the US Saturn right here. So more challenges, and I feel like both of those could very well be times of confusing communication and possible aggressions of some kind, fighting. So one of the questions we're being asked is, has everything been working for us even before 2020? Were we happy? Were we living meaningful and fulfilling lives? And if not, why? And what limiting beliefs were holding us back? So that's the work we're in the midst of still. It started and we're continuing it. So here's the charts. Where's the, hold on. I'm looking for, just don't see my, all right. There were some slides in here for, they're gone. No. All right. Interestingly, missing a few slides, but that's okay. We don't need them. There were some slides for, thank you. So the eclipses of, oh, I think we already looked at those. Yeah, maybe that was in the last section. All right. All right, let's go to Jupiter. Eclipse and energy is very subtle, and the eclipse in December was right on my moon, the lunar eclipse, and the great American eclipse in 2016, a few years ago, which I drove up to see. It was my first time to get to see an eclipse, was right on my sun. So I have felt the very subtle energy of eclipses, but I actually think they're so subtle and their influences over such a long period of time that they're rather hard to talk about. It's more of a subtle energy that you feel. So Jupiter, let's talk about Jupiter before we take a break. And yeah. So Jupiter entered Aquarius just in time to meet up with Saturn in December. And the last 2 times it was in Aquarius was 2009 and 1997. So you can think back on those years how they went for you, and when you might have, and where in your chart you might have fixed signs in early degrees, and you'll get an idea of this coming year. Jupiter this year will be asking if the way we spend time is meaningful and what brings us quality of life. And you know, when restaurants and clubs and sports and bars and socializing in general and the world basically closed down, where did we turn to find meaning in our lives? How did we fill our time? Those are important questions. Jupiter will conjunct the US moon 3 times, April 23rd, August 15th, and December 13th. And it's possible this could inspire some hope that things are going to improve, but because of Neptune's influence, we might be very careful that solutions being offered really are what they seem. Be very grounded with those. But personally, it's a time to consider dreaming and thinking bigger, creating more meaning in our lives, and examining our life philosophy to make sure it supports the kind of life we really want to be having. However, know that in 2009, when Jupiter was just entering Aquarius the last time, swine flu showed up. So it is possible we are going to continue having issues with viruses in 2021. All right. Jupiter-Uranus square on January 17th at 6 degrees Taurus, adding to the challenging pileup at the end of this month. It's very likely there will be a leak or a big revelation of some kind of information. I believe the information could have something to do with the foreign powers influence as well, because Jupiter rules foreign and maybe even more foreign than we can imagine. So the Jupiter shadow is justifying actions, overconfidence and egotism, overdoing things, self-righteousness, needing to be right, fundamentalist beliefs, which are very black and white, only seeing the good stuff and ignoring the difficult, which leads to not facing the shadow, and self-serving behavior. The first decan of Aquarius is the lone genius decan, which whose best intentions to improve the conditions of humanity can sometimes result in ruin. Dr. Frankenstein is a good example, with which strangely brings to mind Bill Gates. Sorry, it does. Jupiter peaks into Pisces this year, giving us a taste of next year when it will be in Pisces. That was redundant, but it will retrograde back and it'll spend most of the year in Aquarius. So before we go into Saturn and the rest of the charts, we will take a little 5-minute break. So you can clear the smoke that's coming out of your ears. All right, I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Recording.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're gonna talk about Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and some fun stuff at the end.
Welcome back again.
All right, thank you. We did it. We made it. All right, Saturn. Excellent. Attempt 2, number 2 for Saturn. All right, here we go. All right, so Saturn went briefly into Aquarius during 2020 and coincided with lockdown, an increase of censorship, heavy-handed government, financial destruction, and loss of livelihood. Hopefully this isn't a preview of how it will be the next 2.5 years as Saturn continues in Aquarius, but it's likely. Previous visits of an Aquarian Saturn saw the civil rights movement, 62 to 64, the end of apartheid, 91 to 93, and the New Deal, 32 to 35. So it could also work in our favor this time as well. We just got to get a handle on it and steer it the right direction. As long as the New Deal is not the Great Reset, we might be okay. So Saturn-Uranus square lasts about 2 years, from November 2020 to January 2023. And that's a challenging thing because they're opposite energies. Saturn is conservative and state, and Uranus is a lot of change. Saturn doesn't like change so much. Uranus wants nothing but change. So this all leans more towards technology being the new structure, government apparatus of control, digital finances. And digital finances is something that we should take a good look at. It sounds like it would make life easier. The next step would be, implanting a chip so you don't have to carry around your bank card. But the thing with digital finances is that it can be hacked. Then it means greater Big Brother surveillance in your financial life. And it just gets justified as being good for us, it's good for the collective. We don't, they're saying that it reduces the need for money, which spreads disease, and it will all be safer. And if we give up our privacy, our autonomy, and individuality for, digital money. So, money's a good way to spread contagion, they say, and your fellow citizen has been weaponized and is now seen as more of a threat than a benefit. And it's easy to get on board with something like that if we're not actually thinking about it. So we need to think about how technology can dehumanize us further. So, and the idea is we want to move the other direction and get more soul and more sacredness and more connection back in our lives, instead of going the other direction where things become more remote and colder and more machinery and robots. And there's a place where I suppose technology can be a good thing, but we need to make conscious choices. Otherwise, it's going to wind up going sideways on us, going wonky. So the Saturn shadow in Aquarius brings to mind things like benevolent popular dictators, billionaire philanthropists, the greenwashing of corporations and products designed to make us believe they care about the environment, using technology to control the population, playing God with genetics, even though we don't really know enough about life really to be messing with those kind of things. This all takes place in our second house, so of course digitizing the economy. So Saturn, it wants us to stop projecting the father archetype onto the government and own our own authority, take responsibility for our own lives, and be responsible, mature individuals, which, it's more fun to hire somebody else to do it all, which is pretty much what we do with the government. All right, so let's move on to Chiron. Chiron, semi-sextile Uranus is exact on March 31st, May 3rd. I don't usually look at semi-sextile too much, but I have for these charts because they look interesting. Semi-sextile is 30 degrees, and so in this case, it's integrating and making room for people of all walks of life, philosophies, lifestyles, striving to improve conditions for the outcasts or unincluded, exploring unique ways of healing, especially those related to energy, frequency, etc. During this time, we saw, and this has been going on since 2008, and will continue throughout 2021. We saw the inclusion of Reiki into hospitals, which I didn't see that coming. I never thought that would happen. It's wonderful. I'm a Reiki master myself, and I love it. But I just find it so amazing that hospitals say, like, yeah, come on in, come do Reiki. At least they used to when you could go to hospitals. I think this also probably contributed to Obama's victory, being, you know, African-American president for a change after hundreds of years of only white presidents. I think it's also been working on raising our consciousness as well, greater concern for how our actions affect the earth, understanding how we're all connected and that there's only one race, the human race. The shadow of that would be cancel culture, racism going underground or in remission, but not dealt with directly and then exploding out later, which is what happens when we repress things instead of deal with things. Fully understanding the control tactic false narrative that's happening, deriving sense of self by belonging even to groups that aren't that healthy or in alignment with how we really are. The competition of wounds because of Chiron, attention getting through victimization. We've seen a lot of that over the last 10 years. Life revolves around and becomes all about the many ways we have been victimized, and what Carolyn Myss calls, Carolyn Myss, I think she pronounced it, calls woundology. Competition of who can out weird everyone else, whose wound is bigger. Eccentricity is the shadow of authenticity. We can still let our freak flag fly, hard to say, while being authentic. It just doesn't become all that we are. And you know, the competition for whose wound is bigger. If we keep it up, it's going to be an Olympic. It's going to be in the Olympics soon. Chiron in Aries is a wound of identity, the childish me first attitude of the country, of our national psyche, a desire to be liked by everyone and still get our own way. No amount of material success will fix this. Only the doing of the hard work, taking responsibility to mature into a better self. For the, hold on. So the way we do that is to start by owning our wounds and our mistakes and healing them, much like Germany did after World War II. They were dedicated to not repeating that mistake, I feel, and they didn't sweep the atrocities under the rug. They brought them out and dealt with them, I think, in fairly good form. And that can be seen now in their response to some of the things that have been going on in 2020. They've been in the forefront, them in England, actually. London has done a good job of standing up for their civil rights during it all. Lao Tzu said, when you accept yourself, the whole world accepts you. So that's a good quote for that configuration. Excuse me. So very importantly, the United States is having Pluto return, a Neptune opposition, and a Chiron return. These are the three big things that are coming up and that we're already feeling the impact of. So the Chiron return is a big thing, and it's something we all have at age 50 to 52 approximately. And because this happens every 50 to 52 years, the United States has had these before. Before the return happens, it will oppose Saturn in the US chart and square the sun tightly. That will be the spring and fall of 2022 and 23. It's important to look ahead because we're already feeling these energies, and that's when it's exact. But like winter, we don't feel it on winter solstice. We start to feel it ahead of time, and sometimes even beyond spring equinox. It's exact, the Chiron return is exact in 2025, but it gets really close several times before that. And before it actually happens, Pluto will already have had our Pluto return, which will, and then Pluto will be at 2 degrees Aquarius at the time of the Chiron return. During previous returns, we had the Civil Rights Act of 1875. We had a huge tornado outbreak in 75 as well. In 1923, we had Disney and Warner studios being founded, the Hollywood sign inaugurated. War Resisters League was founded, which is very Chiron, you know, in Aries Chiron's in Aries in the US chart, so that's very appropriate. And in 74, when it happened again, there was another tornado outbreak. So I'm starting to think that Chiron return or Chiron in Aries has something to do with tornadoes. Seems a pattern is appearing here. Chiron mid-year will be squaring the sun after it squares Venus and Jupiter, which I believe is the reason we're finally facing who we are and what we've become as a nation. US has a square from Chiron to Mercury in Cancer, which talks a good show in the 8th house using psychology and manipulation, and invests using other people's money, develops banking to keep money safe, has a good poker face that gets them in trouble or keeps them out of trouble, depending on your perspective. Strategic communication to manipulate emotions and resources. All these deep fears and emotions running under the surface, hidden away, makes the US seem a little aloof and cold despite efforts to save everyone and bring democracy to the world. The shell is not so thick that on that Cancer shell that most of us can't see through that scheme though. Questions are we going to grow into the idealistic shoes and really become a democracy, or are we going to keep faking and pretending? We can still become a democracy. It's sliding the other direction, but I have hope. The US chart, after all, does have Sagittarius ascendant, so I'm going to be optimistic for us finally being able to step into those big ideals that the founding fathers had of us being that bastion of democracy. Democracy is a process. It's not a destination that we get to and then we can call it quits and sit back and put our feet up. It's a process that we all need to be involved in. So we can become that country for the people, by the people, rather than for the money, by the moneyed. We can get there by owning our wounds and mistakes and making better decisions. As a nation and as individuals, we need better understanding of our emotions because Chiron's in the 4th house. We need to heal those wounds, not use them to define ourselves with. We have to stop passing those wounds down and writing them into the cultural script. We have to stop the vicious cycle of wounding, vicious circle of wounding. We need to get back in our bodies and stop dissociating, eat food that is food. We need to exercise, be in our bodies. We need to create a healthy, balanced sense of community, tradition, family. These are all 4th house things. It's time for us to rewrite those stories of how we do all of these things, of parenting, the absent fathers, the unwanted and abused children of the nation. We can do this. So these are 2 charts of Chiron return for those of you who want to see the astrology behind it all. In 2023, Chiron's at 19 degrees, and 2025 it goes exact. But we're already feeling the effects, in my opinion, as it slowly approaches. So Uranus has been in Taurus since 2019 and will continue to be there until 2026. Previously, it was in Taurus from 34 to 42 when we saw economic hardship, World War II, millions of murdered people, Hitler declaring himself Führer, Social Security Act, unemployment pay, and pensions of the New Deal. In 1850 to 59, we saw the California gold rush and the financial panic that happened as a result of the gold rush. A lot of banks having problems. 1767 to 1775, we saw the American Revolution. So you can see some of the previous energies and some of the potential for how it will express this time. And it's already at, I think, 6 degrees. So we've already had it for a while. So we are already feeling its influence. So Uranus in Taurus is actually helping pave the way for a kind of shadowy age of Aquarius that will financially gain from technology, and in fact helped those in control make enormous amounts of money last year, while the rest of us lost a lot. In an active balance, in an out of balance chart like the US, This means an underdeveloped heart, a selfishness born from wounds and lack of true character. But you know, we're still kind of a young country, and there's still time for us to build character and substance and mature into those, you know, fit into those big shoes that you know, the founding fathers made for us. Don't know what that means. Sometimes I don't understand my own writing. All right, the shadow. Taurus doesn't like change much, and so there can be resistance to making change when it's Uranus, which is the great change maker. This might be why the solution being offered, the Great Reset, is not a new structure, but a remarketing of the old one. It can be sudden upsets that are difficult to face, denial that a radical change needs to take place, living in the mindset of the past, missing a window of opportunity, difficulty connecting to the zeitgeist of the time, or finding one's people, group, tribe, or social support system. Kind of hard to do last year since we can't even really socialize. The darker side of technology, globalism, and getting absorbed by bias or phobia about others. It's 2021, so why is anyone's sexual orientation or, you know, life choices even an issue anymore? I don't really understand why. And handing over that decision-making process to anyone else, like the government, doesn't make any sense. I'm like, let's just be who we are and not ask for permission. Why do we think we need to make others conform to our ideas? I don't know. As Uranus and Taurus traverses the US fifth house, these questions get the spotlight. Uranus wants us to devise a more authentic relationship to material possessions when it's in Taurus, and money. And one of the shadow side manifestations of this, of course, is the digitized currency as an option. It's asking us to rethink materialism and questioning how we find a deeper happiness, a sense of humanity and meaning without money and possessions being at the center of that. It's the price our soul pays for materialism, the debt, the mortgages, the vitality draining 40 to 50 hours a week, chasing down enough money to make the car payment, pay the health insurance costs, etc. Our relationships, our health, and our ability to dedicate time to self-improvement and self-actualization and actual happiness are traded for the material pursuit. So these things are brought into question with Uranus and Taurus. Materialism is mostly used to boost our low self-esteem, to make us feel better about ourselves, less lonely, more successful in life, more attractive, to get you know, external validation from others. Oh, look, what a nice car, what a nice house, you know, that kind of thing. And to make us feel more powerful than we actually are. So instead of focusing on actually being powerful and actually feeling like we have a successful and fulfilling, meaningful life, we use these things as sort of placeholders or compensation. More than ever, we're being asked, where's our heart? What do we really love? Do possessions really contribute to quality of life? Is technology really making our lives better? Is Facebook contributing and supporting real social interactions, deep relationships? Is it worth allowing ourselves to be data mined and censored without so much as a complaint, just so that we can chat to somebody in Facebook? Are these things making the world a better place? And if not, what wound in us keeps us hanging on to them? What does our spending pattern say about us and our level of self-awareness and empowerment? Do we actually know that everything we own will fall apart and rot and and be landfill very soon? And that which we have in our heart is what really matters. It's time to reevaluate these things. Separate our worth from our wealth and realize that we are not our bank accounts or our fancy cars. Social experiments to test our readiness for these things like chipping, tracing, loss of privacy, loss of civil liberties, digital currency have been going on for years in various countries. And they've been telling us it's for our own good and our own safety, and that they're very concerned for us, but they don't seem to be that concerned for us when it comes to, selling us other things that are bad for us, like junk food or, alcohol, drugs, tobacco, pharmaceuticals that are turn out to be dangerous. Yeah. So, do they really care? That's the question. Good question. So, let's see. The last time when tyranny reigned during the last 7-year period of Uranus and Taurus, lies were told and believed, rules and orders followed. Censorship was so strong that it even labeled people as wrong, and they were killed. This is World War II we're talking about. So the question is, who are the bosses in today's new tyranny that we're expected to support and obey? And what in us makes us want to follow them? What fears, insecurities, and wounds? Uranus and Taurus is also asking us to rethink agriculture. And that's already started. There's a lot of people doing that. I highly recommend a film on Netflix called Kiss the Ground. Great documentary, it's beautiful. Let's see, hold on. So the Marcos movement in Mexico in the 90s was a really good example of a very grounded, well-orchestrated Uranian technological revolution. They used the internet, they got international support, and I have a lot of respect for how they did things. And it's a good revolution to look at. It was for the rights of the indigenous population of Mexico. So just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. And cloning, germ warfare, etc. This configuration wants us to stop a minute and think about the future, to make sure we're being responsible with new technologies, to think of the price we'll pay later for haste or lack of ethics. It wants us to develop the maturity to be able to deal with these changes before we push them forward. Like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. So Neptune, I feel has been unrepresented in astrology. I can't talk anymore, sorry. And that makes sense because Neptune is kind of a quiet, behind the scenes planet, doesn't really want a lot of attention. But what's happening with Neptune is big. It's really big. And it's at the root of a lot of what's been going on. I feel like Neptune has caused a collective psychotic break. I know that sounds serious, but there's no other way to describe it. 2020 was by far one of the most confusing and chaotic years I've ever witnessed. So much misinformation, so much, conflicting information, dueling medical experts. One needed an advanced degree in communication and a thorough understanding of propaganda manipulation techniques to parse it all out and understand it. Everyone else just believed whatever was repeated in their favorite news channel over and over, and dealt with the anxiety and fear that it caused. Despite the intentional contradictions, the adamant authoritarian tone, the surreal events that just got weirder as the year progressed, many people did the work to try to figure out what was going on, and there was a lot of information available if you just knew where to look. This isn't our first rodeo, and people worldwide have dealt with control and manipulation for hundreds of years, millennia. And apparently we've learned a few things, and luckily for us, the US has an Aquarius moon, which represents the citizenry and makes us more likely to think for ourselves and stand up to authority on a good day. So, also with Neptune, the veil seemed to get thinner. The veil between the worlds. I had all kinds of friends and clients reporting huge increase in strange and wonderful synchronicities and abilities and premonitions and all kinds of things happening this year. I also feel like Neptune is causing a bit of Munchausen by proxy syndrome, which is a very Neptunian problem. The unprecedented choice to treat healthy populations as if they were sick and then offer to take care of them while simultaneously destroying their lives and businesses seems reckless and not well thought out, and very Munchausen by proxy. So the thing that Munchausen and media manipulation have in common is gaslighting, which I've put in a couple of slides about gaslighting in case anyone doesn't know what that term means. It's basically treating somebody like they're wrong, their perceptions are off, they're incapable of thinking right, or just plain crazy conspiracy theorists for going against the grain. Neptune also rules, sorry, let's go back to this one. There we go, Neptune. Neptune also rules science to some degree, and we found out these scientists and companies backed by the big bucks could be disappointing and dishonest and responsible for the disabling and death of thousands, like Purdue, the company that sold us Oxycontin. They knew it was addictive, and none of them have spent any time in prison despite 3,000 lawsuits, pleading guilty in court, and paying an $8 billion fine. So they're not the only ones, Purdue. There are many more doing the same thing. So all of these realities duking it out for center stage have made us loosen our grip on some of our own dearly beloved stories, things we tell ourselves about life to feel secure and safe. It helps us wake up a little bit to just how enslaved and exploited we are by a system that intentionally is structured to support the insanely rich and ignore the rest of us. The pressing Neptunian question becomes, how are you going to reclaim your life and your, how are we going to reclaim our lives and minds from a system that we created to control them? I love that sentence. How are we going to reclaim our lives and minds from a system that we created to control them? And I refer you back to the slide of egregores. So Neptune wants us to see how good we are at self-deception and how we are our own worst enemy. It wants us to have the courage to bring the skeletons in the closet out into the sunlight. It wants us to wake up from our dysfunctional dreams. And the way to do that is by working with our shadow. We have to heal and integrate our shadow. I feel like this is one of the reasons that Neptune and Pluto change place for 20 years during the course of their cycle. In this slide down here on the bottom right, I've included a drawing of it. You can see up here on the top left, they go together very closely in the sky for 20 years, but reversed positions. And I think the reason they do that is because for that 20 years, Pluto is helping us erase the rotten scripts and the dreams that aren't working for us, and giving Neptune a chance to come up with more creative, more empowered scripts, more better narratives, something that's a little closer to the truth. Neptune brings into question the concept of victimization and how we participate in this dynamic by handing over our power, by not using discernment, by having bad boundaries, and how we can break the vicious cycle and bring relationships into balance. In the US chart, Neptune is most elevated, which is a powerful position. And this is why the media and Hollywood have been incorporated so carefully and intentionally as a strategy, spin master, to create false narratives for maintaining control and for profit, of course. It's common knowledge now that the FBI and CIA have journalists on payroll. I read it in the New York Times, so it must be true. I have a link for that in case anybody doubts it. So Neptune most elevated can be the sign of a mystic, a guru, but also the sign of spies, drug dealers, organized crime, slavery, and trafficking, bootleggers, and pathological liars, all of which the US government has kind of a long history with. So Edward Snowden said, when exposing a crime is treated as committing a crime, you're being ruled by criminals. I love that, and I think it's an appropriate quote for what we're talking about here. So we're undergoing that difficult maturation phase, you know, when you're a kid and there's that point in your childhood when you look at adults and you realize they don't know what they're doing, or they fall off that pedestal you've had them on. That's kind of where we are. And we're realizing that this projected father figure, the government, isn't really doing their job well and has some dark tendencies that need to be looked at. Many people would rather do anything, believe anything, rather than face this growth hurdle. Some people really need to believe that the government is good, and I understand that. I'd say my own awakening to the nefarious dealings of the government was not easy. It was very depressing, but I do feel like my Buddhist practice helped me get a handle on that. If it wasn't for that, it probably would have, you know, been much worse. It is interesting that you know, it is time for us to face those the disconnect between reality and our collective narrative. You know, the collective narrative we tell the world that we're number one, we're the most democratic nation on the planet, we have so much excess freedom and democracy, we can export it in the guise of war, and we do that with carefully selected countries and intervene in their politics, usually countries with valuable resources. Yeah. What Neptune wants from us is to understand what is dream and what isn't. And one of the most mundane, focused, practical, and matter-oriented signs is opposite Pisces, which is Virgo. So when we bring those two into balance, we're able to bring the sacred into the mundane and have a more grounded spiritual existence. So they balance each other very, very nicely. So Neptune, it's complicated. There's a lot more to it. Just going to move on though to Pluto. I have 15 minutes. Yeah, okay. So this is a good slide for Neptune. I just find this meme very entertaining. Mark Twain it says, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. I love that quote. I love Mark Twain. So paradox and confusion. I think the conversation about Neptune, we need to talk about truth and what is truth. Orwell says, the further society drifts from truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. Yeah. So a book called Buddhism is Not What You Think by Steve Hagen talks about how the Buddhist temples of Japan have two gigantic demons guarding the entrance, guarding the truth. And those demons are paradox and confusion. No figure or statue represents truth, because truth isn't something that can be conceptualized. But paradox and confusion are things that we go through in order to get there, to find truth. It's a good book, I highly recommend. So getting comfortable with embracing paradox is a very important thing. And it's like F. Scott Fitzgerald said, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. So Pluto is as individuals, we never see Pluto return because it moves very slowly, but we do see a square from Pluto to Pluto, and that's one of the markers for a midlife crisis. It's often accompanies a kind of dark night of the soul because Pluto is a very intense planet. And because Pluto rules over power and adversity, this is one of my favorite Plutonian quotes. Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you really want to test a man's character, give him power. And that was Abraham Lincoln. Pluto in Capricorn goes until 2024, and this is the thing I mentioned earlier. We're in in line for having a Pluto return. So our natal Pluto as a nation is in the second house of finances and self-esteem. So, you know, we have to think about possessions, what part they play in our lives, how we use possessions to compensate for low self-esteem and things like that. Pluto wants us to eliminate anything and everything that's limiting our growth, and it strips them away. Loss is one of the key words for Pluto, and learning how to deal with loss is also facing death. As you know, last year we spent a lot of time facing our collective shadow inability as a nation to deal with death, and we definitely need healing around that area. So Pluto, transiting Pluto gets in within a few minutes, very, very close to being a return this coming year in March and April. 20 minutes, it's very close. It's less than a degree. And then it spends another couple of months retrograding away from it. And in October, it goes direct again. So for all intents and purposes, we have our, in my opinion, first Pluto return in March and April. So I do feel like this is going to affect us financially, and also continue with our collective issues with facing death, and have us all deal with, as individuals and collectively, with loss and intensity. And it's an opportunity. Pluto's always an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. Those of us with Pluto in a strong position in our natal chart are used to that kind of thing, and so this kind of thing collectively is easier for us because we've done it already many times in our life. As a shaman I worked with in Brazil told me that I've reincarnated several times in this life without having to die first. And basically what she was saying is this Pluto reinvention of self and recreation of self. It means everything gets stripped away. It's like the journey down into Hades, into the underworld, where everything gets stripped away until there's nothing left, and then you get to rebuild and emerge a better you. Pluto's opposing Mercury this year, which, you know, I already talked about a little bit when I talked about Mercury. There's a semi-sextile with the moon, the US's moon, which I don't usually pay much attention to, but it's part of us, a blind spot, an emotional blind spot, unintegrated shadow, and gives us the mask of overconfidence when it comes to emotions. And so Pluto wants to know if we're going to take that journey to, you know, strip everything away and reinvent ourselves. And it wants to know if we're going to own our power. Pluto's about power. So are we able to get to a place where we can own our power and wield it ethically? That's the question. And how deep can we go with learning about EQ, emotional quotient, the greater social emotional understanding that we all need as individuals? Also, there's been a mutiny of priests come out against the Pope because the Pope is in favor of the Great Reset. I feel this is very Neptunian involved, and probably the Neptune opposition squaring Mars, that all these archbishops and cardinals would speak out during their sermons, during Mass, against the Pope. I find incredible and very Neptunian square Mars. There's the Pluto slide I forgot to show you. And here's Pluto chart you can look at later. I've made a chart so you can easily see the retrograde. I obviously have some Virgo in my astrology chart. Thanks to that, you have this lovely Pluto chart. Here's the Sibley progressed chart and the Sibley natal and progress chart, if you'd like to look at that. We don't have time to cover it, unfortunately. So the Great Reset is being influenced by Uranus. It's Neptunian, it's Plutonian, it's the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, it's the shadow of Aquarius. It's basically all of the things we've been talking about. Inside the circle, you can see some of the companies that are behind the Great Reset. And there's an interesting quote by Naomi Klein here on the left. I suggest, if you're interested in understanding what's coming in 2021, that you spend some time looking at the few slides I've included about the Great Reset. This is some information about the marketing narrative, the marketing strategy, and the end game of the Great Reset. And Klaus Schwab is one of the main people behind the Great Reset, and these are some quotes of his. There's some very good documentaries about the Great Reset, and I've included some links on the last slide if you're interested as well. The Corbett Report, James Corbett, who lives in China, he's a Canadian who lives in Japan. Highly recommend his videos. He has an incredible documentary about Bill Gates. If you want to learn more about Bill Gates, I didn't know anything about him until I saw his documentary. Very good. I've included Klaus Schwab's chart, and then an astrologer I heard last year was looking at Bill Gates' chart and the Imperial College chart and Fauci's chart, and then placing them on country charts and things like that. So I thought, well, let's see what Klaus Schwab's chart looks like when placed on the Sibley chart, and it's very interesting. I've included a slide here that shows some of the things that are quite amazing. All of this list here is KS is Klaus Schwab. So I think you'll find these slides very interesting. Also, you know, it's very hard for some of us. I'm almost 60. And I remember back in the 90s, I was listening to Timothy Leary speak in a small bar in Los Angeles, and he was talking about nanotechnology, nanobots being injected into people. And I thought, this is the result of too much LSD. And I suddenly saw him with a tinfoil hat, and I just totally disregarded him. And I feel very bad about that, because several months later, I was looking at Scientific America, and there was an article about nanobots, and I thought, wow. And so I feel like I'm a little behind the time when it comes to keeping up with what's going on in technology. So here's a slide in case you're thinking that the shadow of the age of Aquarius isn't already in the works. Here's some proof. Here's some good quotes to support that. And here are some newspaper articles for research, 2 pages. So things are in the mix. I really am a big fan of H.L. Mencken, and I love these 2 quotes. The urge to save humanity is almost always a false front for the urge to rule. It's one of the best quotes that fits our times. And I think it's time to bring back out this quote from the 90s from Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. If ever there was a time when this was true, it's now. And this is the resource page. I did leave off a few things, but if you want any more information, you can also feel free to email me. And I am starting 2 classes at the end of this month. One will be an intuitive development group, which we'll do via Skype or Zoom. And the other one will be astrology, but not for learning astrology so much as, although you will learn astrology, but using astrology as like a mystery school to for individuation and self-awareness. And to me, that's the greatest use of astrology, and that's how I do my readings usually, is help people integrate all their parts and heal their wounds in order to live more expansive and more joyful lives. So thank you for listening. I hope you got something useful out of this.
Q&A now.
And we're going to have some questions and answer session now.
We're going to stop share.
Hey, now I get to see all of you.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Chuck.
So we will have, we're getting ready to.
All right, so the chat room is open. If anyone has any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
So tell about the sheet that you filled out. Or
Okay, month by month.
yeah.
So Susan is going to post somewhere on the website near the video, probably a month-to-month breakdown of some of the stuff we just talked about, probably in a little bit more astrological detail, but I've given you more of the psychological and energetic feel for what the year is going to be like. So gridlock in Congress. I do think that I don't know specifically if it feels like it's going to be a gridlock in Congress. I feel like the powers that be are strong enough to maybe push through that. for good or bad, I'm not sure. But I do feel like it's not over, and it's not going to be over for a while. In my own words, what the Great Reset is. So the Great Reset is being marketed as they keep repeating, just like they've been repeating the dark winter, the dark winter, the dark winter, which is very weird because I don't feel like it's particularly dark. But the dark winter, strangely, was the name of the 2001 practice session they did about smallpox outbreak back in 2001, just a few months before 9/11, and that was they called it the dark winter. So it's weird that they're repeating dark winter right now. I don't know why. And the Great Reset is being labeled as inclusive and all about sustainability, but it's all these corporations like Microsoft and MasterCard and Visa and Big Pharma and all these people that haven't really shown any interest in the environment or inclusivity before now. So apparently they've all suddenly grown a conscience, and find it hard to believe. And one of their main things is digitizing money, and I feel like that's going to mean Big Brother is going to be inserted in between every transaction that we do, and it's just going to be more loss of privacy and more invasiveness. So hope that answers. It's a really big thing, so it's hard to answer in a couple sentences. Big surprises in January. It was hard for me to get past January and look at the other 11 months because January is so full of astrological events that feed on each other. I think it's going to be, we're only at what, the 7th, and we've already had quite a interesting time of it. So big surprises, yes, absolutely. I feel like January and February and probably other times throughout the rest of the year, because of the Uranus aspects, there's going to be lots of surprises this year, just like 2020 was full of surprises that were so weird. Yeah, expect the unexpected, because Uranus is nothing but unexpected. So what is a lot to take in. Which books? I would watch the Noam Chomsky Requiem for a American Dream video. I would look at some of the websites and videos that I've posted on the final page. Yeah. Yeah, January 20th. It's
I'm gonna look up the link to that Google Docs. while you keep
okay.
talking.
Okay. January 20th. Yes, building up to January 20th and after January 20th. The end of January is particularly gnarly, and you know, like Jung said, the best way to deal with these large, crazy collective events is to really be as centered and grounded and in our hearts and as self-actualized as possible. So just, you know, meditate, talk to your guides, reach out to loved ones who are on the same channel and support each other. We can make it through all of this, and it's, you know, there's a lot of good things happening in the sky as well, and you know, trying to support us as we you know, go through this growth period. And that's what it is. It's a period of growth. We're in a maturation crisis. It's okay. We've done that as individuals. All of us here have had maturation crisis where, you know, we just thought we weren't going to make it, and we did. So we can do it collectively as well. Where on the website can they see the slides?
It'll be on YouTube. It'll be a YouTube post.
Mhm. So it'll be a YouTube post, and there'll be a link probably on the probably somewhere near the announcement page.
So yeah, so y'all can't see me, I'm right here, but we have a YouTube page, and we now of course do all of the whole lecture edited. It will be edited slightly. So it might take, you know, 4, 5, 6 days for us to do the editing and get it on YouTube, but Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship YouTube site is where you can find this. And I'm also at the end of the chat box. I thought I had the link, Google Docs link, but we will put that on our website. So we'll let you know about that.
Oh, food shortages.
Read that out loud, because it's
okay.
Y'all can do it to everyone instead of directly to, like, privately to us, so you can send your questions to everyone.
Okay. So upcoming food shortages. I don't think that the damage that was done in 2020 is going to go away quickly, and major damage was done, and some of us might understand how much damage, but some of us might not, and it was a lot. You know, I've done a lot of research this year of keeping up with what's going on, and seeds, gardening, organizing with each other to find alternative food sources. I don't know about hoarding food. I'm personally not doing that, but I am gardening, which I've always been a gardener anyway. So yeah, and I have a lot of faith that things will work out, even if things get difficult. So I'd say find inside yourself and with your relationship with spirit, find that place of connection and faith, and ask for guidance, ask for signs, ask for what you should do. The more we stay out of fear, the better we'll be. Stay in your heart and know that, you know, the Great Depression was very difficult, and people grew victory gardens. People found alternative ways to get through. We can support each other by running soup kitchens. You know, all these things might be necessary in the coming time, and hopefully they won't. But yeah, so yeah, we have to create our own communities, as Susan is saying. Yeah. The Great Reset is not the ascension, right? Yes, it's not the ascension. I have mixed feelings about the ascension, because I've been spiritually active, involved since the 80s, and people have been talking about great leaps of consciousness and ascensions that were supposed to have happened before. And I think it's like Age of Aquarius or any kind of aspect or transit. It's not, on this day we all wake up. It's more like a process, like democracy. It's a process of awakening. It's not like tomorrow we're all going to be enlightened. So we need to do the work, and the work is looking inside. It's getting in touch with our shadow sides, because we need to integrate the light and the dark. That's just necessary. Monsanto heads the USDA. That's just great. I didn't know that. That's horrifying news. Thank you for that. We got to stop that, get Monsanto out, that's for sure. So do we need to avoid Bitcoin, take out our money from stock market? Yeah, I've had a friend who's been asking me that, and I have one of my clients is a stockbroker. I think the stock market is very Neptunian, and it's sort of a very, it's all based on perceptions and stories, and it's not really a physical solid thing. So it's kind of a chimera. It's an illusion. It's a dream. And so the fact that it rises and falls and breaks, it's gambling. I'm not a gambler, so I'm not the person to answer that question. But it's a good question. I have no idea. But finances and economy are going through some serious changes. So, you could take your money out, but money could also be useless. I lived in Brazil during a time when inflation went from the bus being 20 cents per ride to being like $3 a ride, and people were jumping out windows. And it was during President Kohler, and it was a mess. It was kind of like a little stock, what happened in the 30s when the stock market crashed. So, you can take your money out, but money might also be worthless. I'm not saying buy gold either. I personally, my Aquarian Jupiterian side thinks that we should come up with, other ways to support ourselves than the sort of money stand-in for power. And I don't know what that looks like. So, I think Charles Eisenstein's book, he has a book on the economy, and it has a spiritual name. I can't remember. Charles Eisenstein, highly recommend him, any of his videos, and his book about economics. It's not a dry read. It's very soulful. So it's about coming up with alternatives. So that, for the person who asks about the stock market or about food sources, read Charles Eisenstein or watch some of his videos. He's very uplifting, and he's very Aquarian in a very positive way. So I feel like he's a good person to help lead this Aquarian age into something more beautiful and away from the dystopian sci-fi that we seem to be heading in. How do we sign up to your classes? My email address is what is the email? My email address will be posted on the website.
It is on the website.
It is on the website. So look for my email there. And my website is astrozola.com.
Yeah. Her email is on the main page right now, or under her information on the website, Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship. Her contact information is there. And we are also going to put the Google Docs link on that same page. We haven't done it yet, but we will have. And she has, like, in January, this is happening, and these are the tendencies to look out for. February, and it's much more precise and more nuts and bolts, I guess, than what she actually presented. And she worked a long time to get that for us. So you will have that to put on your refrigerator if you need it.
It's more astrology. I felt like there might be a lot of people attending tonight who weren't astrologers or maybe didn't know a lot about astrology. So I kept my talk more about the energies and the psychology, the meaning of the transits, rather than all the, I tried to keep a lot of the astrology chat out of it so that it didn't sound too draining or confusing. So yes, this is a great time we're living in, and if we need to look at it like that. Why is this happening to us? No, it's why is this happening for us? This is an opportunity for us to regain our humanity, to come together, realize that it's the human race. We are the human race, and we have power, and we can make this world a better place, starting here with ourselves. And this is going to be great. It's been challenging. It's been difficult. It's going to continue to be difficult. And the less we can just other each other, judge each other, push each other away, the less we can do all of that, and the more we can come together and see our commonalities, and just stay in our hearts and love and realize the oneness. Oneness is a fact. We really are all one. Consciousness is infused in everything. It is what life is. So we got this. We can do this. All of us together.
Yeah. I'm going to say a few closing words, if
Okay.
I may. So,
Thank you very much, everybody.
yeah.
So I'm back. Thank you, everyone who's still here. I appreciate you showing up. I am going to try to, let me find that post. It's a really good, well, I thought I had it ready to zip over to you, but I'm sure if those who really want to see it will see it on our website tomorrow. I posted it on there, but it has the list of all the different months, the aspects, and what to look for. So thank you again for coming. We appreciate your financial support, but the main thing we want to make sure everybody remembers is in the coming year, as with any time really, remember to live in faith, not fear, and to count your blessings every day. So that hopefully will keep you uplifted, and sing a song, turn on the radio and just sing something you love. I've found that that's really helped me a whole lot lately too. So anyway, we will see you again. Sign up for our newsletter, and y'all have a great 2021, the best that you can have. Good night, everybody.